Thanks everybody for being here today. Ellen Cravato speaking here, CEO of the New Canaan Library, along with Cheryl Capitani, our library director. In the room today, we have Rob Lowe, president of our board of trustees. We have Mark Dwele, one of our trustees, Doug Stewart as well, trustee. And we're joined by Hillary Ormond of Town Council, Chris Labrie of Board of Finance, and Eric Thunem remotely, also from Town Council. So welcome everyone. I'm delighted that we have this opportunity to do a joint liaison meeting. It's our very first, and I hope it's not the last. Great efficient process for us. So I thought really what we would do is just run through the basics of our presentation. I know, Eric, you said you had the opportunity to view the video, so apologies for redundancies. We'll go through in an informal way our presentation, and then that'll leave some room at the end to talk through any specifics on numbers or any other questions that you might have. So 2023 and 24 was our first full fiscal year of operations in the new building. And we continue to exceed our own expectations and goals. We have around 1,600 people through our doors every day. Sometimes it's as high as 1,800. So we are one of the most heavily trafficked entities in the town. And that's about a 70% or 100% increase, depending on how you look at it, from the early days of operating in the old building. And I have to say that is not a figure that anyone in their wildest dreams wanted to plan for or did plan for. Our biggest challenge has been to date really just being responsive to the demand for our services and our spaces. It's required a very massive organization-wide effort, and I think a lot of management creativity. Since opening our doors, we've gained many insights into how our new building works and our systems, and how best to modulate our energy use, and what is the right makeup of our programs and services. We've gained a greater understanding of the ways in which people really want to use our spaces, and our staff is working very hard to accommodate those considerable demands and serve the community that they really appreciate. And so in short, we're victims of our own success. That's the headline for our budget discussion. I'm very proud of the transformational impact that we've had in New Canaan. You know, what we're going to share today is not only the evidence of our achievements, but the reasons why this budget is an essential reset that's going to address some of those missing pieces that we've identified in our staffing and our operations that are really a direct result of, you know, what we think of as our crushing popularity. So the proposed budget that we're going to talk about today really reflects the impact of these exceptional and very high levels of usage. And it addresses what the long-term investments are that are necessary to achieve a very sustainable level of service going forward. So a lot of things went well for us in 2024. I'm happy to also provide these slides if that's appropriate.
Stop you just for a second. On the agenda, we were going to appoint the secretary.
Oh.
That was the second item. So before you get going too far, we need to appoint a temporary secretary to take notes and post them to the town. You know, get them over to Tucker and she can get them posted. So, who would like to be?
Your handwriting's so clear.
Yeah, I could do it. So you know, if I'll volunteer to do it, if everybody's okay with that.
Absolutely.
All right. So that item 2 is done. We may go on.
Thank you.
No, that's important, obviously, because it's a public meeting, right?
Yeah.
A lot of great statistics on this slide. We don't have to go into a lot of detail here. I think the main takeaway is to recognize that while we thought we might see the visitorship plateau after our first year of opening, what we've actually seen year to date is a substantial increase. So we are up 20% visitors year to date as of today, and that's substantial. We issued 2,200 new library cards last year. That means people that were renewals. These are new people coming to the library just in the last year alone. I'd also just like to point out that we have the smallest footprint among our peer libraries, but yet we have the most visits. So we've had 55,000 people through our doors, and that compares very favorably with Darien, which had under 250,000. So one other point I think is important, and I know Cheryl's going to touch on this later, but we've started to really successfully hone in on our energy usage so that I think we can now say that we're operating at the kinds of levels and capacities originally envisioned realizing the savings and rebates from our solar. Again, Cheryl's going to go into more detail on this later. And I think it's always worth mentioning that we continue to exceed in our philanthropic fundraising efforts. We have the highest in the state in terms of actual dollars that we raise here in New Canaan. And I think that's a reflection. People are showing their appreciation for our work. We had a few bumps in 2023. The upshot is that now I feel we are in a position to base our budget and projections on a really full year of inhabiting the space and learning how the community needs to be served. So to my mind, that leaves us with really just one question going forward, which is how must we adjust or recalibrate the organization to meet that demand? And so I just also want to surface that from an investment in programs, services, and collection standpoint, we're still playing catch up to our peers. So as we consider the budget, I'd just like to ask us not to forget how underinvestment would impact us. How would it impact our ability to grow? And what kind of drag does underinvestment put on our ability to sustain achievement or innovation and excellence going forward? The top line takeaway is that we need to reset our baseline budget. A one-time realignment is what's necessary to serve a vastly increased public use and to retain and recruit staff. Our staff is very maxed out. The most pressing need that we have, and the thing that will really put the most leverage in the system, bless you, Mark, is to create a full-time custodial role and also to bring in a part-time audiovisual technician to help us keep up with this intense use of building. 70% of our budget is salaries and compensation. We are asking our staff to do more overall in more physical spaces than ever before. We have a need for more support for facilities management and cleaning staff. That is a message you'll hear us repeat several times in the course of our presentation. I think we also need to make a more appropriate investment, annual investment in our programs and collections, funds that are needed to bring us into closer alignment with our peer libraries. And even with what we're asking, we are still not even close to approaching the levels of investment that Darien and others are making in their programs and services. Many times what you'll see in Darien is they are spending twice as much as we are on collections, programs, and services. We can talk about why that is later. And frankly, our building systems, the new building systems that we have here in the library do a lot more than the old systems do. Sophisticated HVAC, et cetera. All of this is more expensive to maintain and run, and that was not unforeseen, but we're certainly learning how to manage it well. We're maintaining our grounds at very comparable levels to where we were before, which I know had been a concern last year. But we're not planting, tulips and hydrangeas. We have a very appropriate and sustainable landscaping plan. And the other thing I think it's important to note about our budget this year is that it doesn't incorporate any element of planning forward for legacy building expenses, whether operating or capital.
Ellen, can I just go back? Sorry, on that last slide. You said targeting 2.5 to 3% raise for existing staff equals 55% of requested increase. I don't understand the parenthetical comment there.
So it's 55% of the requested increase that we're seeking in our budget. The dollar value. So it's the.
Oh, okay. So you're requesting a certain number in your total budget. 55% of that number represents the 2.5 to 3% raise for existing staff. Got it. Thank you.
So the aggregate increase we're seeking from the town is $222,000 this year. The vast majority of that is to support the new custodial and facility support roles and those of inflation-adjusted salary increases for existing staff. I think it's interesting to take a note and say, interesting way to look at it. The town is basically covering our compensation line. And if you look at our fundraising, we're basically funding all of our programs and services. And of course, all of our capital budget items. So I think of us as being self-reliant for that kind of experiential growth that we're offering the community. So just do a very quick review of the operation. I think it's really hard to visualize the extent and volume of activity. We're jammed. These are just some great photos of how busy we are during the day. And, when I think about the number of people coming in the door, what is a visitor doing? When a person comes into the library, they don't stand still. They They have about 8 different touch points. They're borrowing books, they're attending to the service desks, asking questions, they're seeking technology help, they're attending a program, they're using the bathroom, they're using the cafe, then they're using the bathroom again. Repeat, rinse, and times 8 with the 1,600 people through the door, that's an enormous strain. It's a lot of activity. Here's a visual representation of our door traffic. Spiky. More packed rooms. There's the baby stroller brigade that we like to think about when we have 100 people here for story times, a few times a week. We've done some work as well. I think it's important to note that the majority of our programs are serving people who are New Canaan residents. I think that was a question that came up last year at Town Council. We actually went away and added a bit of a survey question to some of our registrations in order to to give ourselves the opportunity to have the answers. And it's. Would you like to speak to that?
It's about 2/3 for the majority of programs. It varies because we have some things that are 6 people programs. We have some 300 person programs. So there is a fluctuation, but by and large, we're serving Canaan.
Are all these programs free of charge to everyone, or is there any kind of bifurcation between in-town versus out-of-town in terms of charging for programs?
There is not a bifurcation in that way. We library programs are free. We do have some programs, and I think Ellen will speak to that a little bit later, that do have a charge if they're a fundraising program or if there is some
Book sale ticketed component.
yeah, some kind of thing where we are responsible for making sure, in order to get a big name author or a celebrity or something, sometimes we have to commit to selling 300 books or 200 books. And so in order to not shoulder that, we'll offer a ticket price. But there is not a resident versus non-resident, and that is completely consistent with all of our neighboring libraries. None of our neighboring libraries make any distinction between resident and non-resident.
I think the other thing to mention here, Eric, is, and this is something that I recently learned, there's a Connecticut state statute that prohibits a public library from charging for programs that advance literacy. And literacy is broad definitions, but we're actually prohibited by law from charging for, let's say, time for twos or any of those programs. And what are the consequences of not following those rules? Well, we'd be standing alone as an island, a library island, where we would have no opportunity to work collaboratively with our peers. Our residents would not be able to borrow books from Darien, for example. We would be denied any form of state funding. So there's really no precedent, and it's not the business model here. And we can really talk about that later. I know there's a lot of talk about, well, can you charge $5 for the Inyoki class, et cetera. But in fact, James, we were talking about that the other day. And of course, if sometimes we do have a materials fee in a rare circumstance, whether it's an art class or something else. But if we're talking about moving the needle on the budget, that's not how we're doing it. But we can talk more about that later.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say I'm super proud. We had Naomi Watts and Stacy London here last night. We had a packed house. It's very dark. I don't know if you can see this image, but we were all breathing each other's oxygen air last night. It was jammed and it was a fantastic event. And this was a ticketed event because we did sell 300 books with Elm Street Books, and we put a little bit of a premium on top of it to turn it into a fundraiser. So where we know we have an opportunity on a selective basis, we are seeking those opportunities to gain a fundraising component. Here's another favorite slide for me. It's the high school bus that's disgorging the students after school. You can get more than one of these a day, and they come in great numbers. They are, amongst our favorite patrons and also our most labor intensive. I'm sure you can speak to that. But it's so exciting. And as you know, I'm a mother of 4. They've all been to the high school. It's the most exciting thing to see how these kids are collaborating. You walk past these rooms and you were worried maybe about what kind of graphics you might have seen on the walls being done on our whiteboards. And I can tell you it's all physics and chemistry. It's all collaborative learning and working. You would be so proud of the students if you were here at 3 o'clock every day. It's really joyful to see. And then we're also collaborating with the students. And I think this is one of the best examples. And there's actually a couple examples, but young man from high school came in and proposed a full day chess festival where there would be learning and competitive play and tournament play. And this was an intergenerational day. There were hundreds of participants. It took place in multiple places throughout the library. This was a major setup and planning exercise for our staff, but they worked with this young man and it was a major success. I hope we find a way to do this every year, not just because I enjoy chess, but because this really brought, I mean, look at who's in the audience, young children and you know, my father, for example. So, and then also it's not, I don't have a slide to share with you, but in the last couple of weeks, we had this extraordinary program, a young man from the high school astronomy, you know, savant came and led 30 people outside in the night sky with his telescope and did this fantastic program working with the children's team. And the community has been just over the moon about it. So
All the like the dads in the town were just fanboying this.
Yeah.
guy. Obsessed with him.
So I love to see those outcomes because that's what our space is and that's what our library can provide to this community. Just another big picture of a lot of people. And we also do things that are in smaller groups.
Yeah, so we, so for adults, in addition to these kind of big programs that fill the auditorium, we do about 40 to 50 smaller workshop type classes for adults every month. So technology workshops, book groups, writing groups, ESL and language and conversation classes, hands-on art instruction, things like that. So to teach essential skills as well as to foster community engagement and connection. So they're super popular and people really reap the social and intellectual benefits. Really appreciative. So here's a look at our adult program spending in the context of our peer libraries. So we offered more programs last year than Darien, and you know, less with less spending. And you can also just see that our budget last year was $55,000 for adult programs. So we filled that gap in what we spent and what our budget was from our own fundraising and grant work. So it's hard to assume the sustainability of that. But
And
we're also still
programming-
budgeting less than what we're spending.
Programming is one of those areas where when we took the haircut on the increase last year, Eric, that was one of the target areas that was hardest hit for us. And so there is a bit of a plan for a restoration in this budget going forward.
So the 85,000 is what you ended up spending last year.
Right, which came from, you know, the LAG funds, right? So from some of our gift funds and some
Right,
other.
and so that was less than you would have spent had you gotten your budget.
It's correct, because the budget ask was 90.
So you spent 85, so you took 5 out of it. For programs, okay, so now this other number.
That's this year.
We took,
This is this year's budget that we're currently in.
Yeah.
So this was our spending from last year.
Oh, this was the prior year.
So we were cut from our current year.
So maybe take a second to orient. So all these columns are historical. So this is 2024 comparison of New Canaan versus the others. And the blue line, which Cheryl will give you some color, that's the fiscal year 26.
26.
Proposed.
Last year, we were cut to 45.
So, okay, so
This year that was
so if
currently-
this was your prior budget, 23-24, you spent 85,000.
Yes,
24-25, what did you spend?
current year, our budget is 45,000.
Oh, sorry, it's a big cut.
It was a big,
it was a big cut.
it was the largest cut that we made last
Okay, so it's half, not $5,000.
That's-
And the blue line represents
What we're asking for,
what you're asking for,
For
which is
which is below what we spent last year,
78,000.
which is our modest proposal we were not even asking to get back up to that 90 originally because we're trying to be conscious of where we're growing and how we're growing. Our biggest need is custodial support, and we've made the decision internally to focus that.
Okay, so you're going to spend a third more on programming than you did last year, but that was a distress budget. And,
No.
and you're not quite getting up to 2 years ago, which was 85, which was kind of normal run rate.
We're off by a year, I think. So we're asking to spend less than what we spent in the fiscal year that just closed last June, right?
Yeah.
So we closed it at 85. This year, we're asking for a number that's,
Yeah, but this year you're spending 45.
no, that was last year. Last year, so there's the adopted budget, right? We have an adopted budget last year. So we went from a 90 ask down to an adopted budget of 45 last year. We spent 85. The delta is came from gift funding and sources that are not sustainable. Like we reduced some of those gift funds and they don't automatically replenish, right? Someone gives us a gift to do some programming 1 year, you know, that's an additional burden on fundraising.
I see what you're saying. Oh,
Yeah.
So you asked for 90,000 in last year's budget, which is for the current year, but you ended up spending actually about 85. Is that the comparison I should make?
Is
I
not.
can't hear you, sorry.
425 is not on this chart. So this is the audited years from 24 because that's the data that exists, right? Because the actuals for the existing year aren't available. For us, for this year that we're currently in, our budget is 45. We asked for 90 last year.
But
For
do
this-
you think you'll overspend that 45? And if you do, that'll come from these other sources?
Yes.
We think we'll overspend it. We're monitoring how we're going to pay for things. We're midway through this fiscal year. You know, we're always hopeful, but this is not sustainable from a planning standpoint.
So we have to seek grants and gifts in real time if we want to plan a program. We have to say, okay, can we find somebody to pay for this? Because it's this great thing.
Eric, were you asking the question, how much are you planning on spending for this fiscal year? Based upon what you've already spent and where the end of the year would be? Is it going to be another 85,000 or basically the same run rate as last year? Forget about the funding of it. What are we looking to spend?
So for example, the Naomi Watts program, right, that we just had, what we spent on that is not, it's not in our budget of that 45, right? Because we were able to add a ticketed element to it.
Right.
Yeah, but let's look at it this way. So you have an expense, right? Which is adult programming, $85,000. Then you have, how do you fund it? So you got 45,000 from the town. And you're saying you got another 40,000 from one-off gifts. Is that the way to look at it?
Last year we did.
Last year being the year that we're currently in.
No.
Last year, fiscal year 23, 24.
Your budget wasn't cut in that year.
But our budget was $45,000 that.
Oh, so did you miss budgeted?
No. We adopted a budget in fiscal year 25 of, I think it's $60,000 for adult programming, let's say, right? Hang on. Where's the adult programming budget? $45,000 was adopted for fiscal year 25. This year, we're proposing to get to 60 in adult programs. The overall budget for programs is 78, which includes the instructional component that's referenced in instruction. We separate, so that's the confusion. We look at adult programming as two parts. One is that smaller programming where there's reference instruction, that more small group symposium style learning. And then there's the bigger adult programs that happen, let's say in the auditorium or outside on the green where you might have a higher volume of people attending. And so combined, those two things are 78 in the current year's request.
And in the fiscal year 25, which was the budget town council approved last year, you were seeking compared to that 78, you were seeking 90?
Right.
Okay, okay. And on a run rate kind of going forward, you think 78 is reasonable, or do you think you'll probably add to that and spend about 85 or $90,000 each fiscal year on your adult programs?
I think it's very possible that that's what we will do, but we're going to do so on the basis of what resources are available to us.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
And I'll plan for that grant funding or, special.
You know, the hardest part of this for me is the fiscal year ending in June 30th, just what year we're in is
yeah.
calendar. It's so hard to talk about.
I know. It's different fiscal years for different entities and government entities versus corporate, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I get it.
What's your fiscal year?
June 30.
Yeah.
Usually the accountants charge less for fiscal year ending at 6/30 than 12/31. That's why you get these staggered, 9/30 is, on September 30 as well. And my CPA had on, because I always wondered why that.
Isn't the federal government September 30th?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't the federal government run a September 30 fiscal year?
That's a good question. I think they probably do for the same reason, that it's easier and cheaper to get accountants to. Actually, when I was doing it for what was Pete Marwick, now KPMG in the city, we were doing the city audit, and it was not a 12/31. I can't remember if it was 6/30 or 9/30, but sorry, I digress.
Interesting.
But I think the point about this is we asked for 90,000 the prior fiscal year, but excuse me, for this fiscal year, but we only get 40, right? So we have a shortfall of 50. We had to backfill it the prior fiscal year, 24. We're gonna have to backfill it in this year. It's just a matter of how much we have to backfill. If it's 78, it's X. If it's 90, which is kind of projected, it's gonna be that additional 12,000.
We're either backfill or we're compelled to do less, which is not what people are
Let's look.
from us.
Town council did not line item.
That's correct.
They didn't say that they
Right.
need to cut this out. In fact, they just cut a big number out and they didn't give an explanation for either why they did it or which areas were of concern to them. So
that cut
so we're all operating kind of in the on that score, but maybe we'll get to that later in the meeting. Your budget is like the Board of Ed budget. You get a block grant
Right.
from the town. How you spend it
It's up to us.
is up to you.
Yeah.
So when you start making these comparisons about, oh, we funded this so much from the town and so much from.
It's actually not that.
It's actually not the way it works. So you should really present your budget the way it works, which is we have this total budget. And the town gives us so much, and our normal fundraising ability is, X hundreds of thousands,
Million.
and there's a gap. And the gap is that we're gonna have to try to fill that somehow. So either we get a little more money from the town, or we have to try to raise it. And that little gap, that $300,000 gap in the overall budget,
Is the.
then is reflected on, if you don't get it, what you have to jettison from your programming plans or staffing plans. So that's kind of how your budget really works.
It's true. And I think it's a bit tricky because, we're presenting a great deal of detail in this budget, which I actually think is possibly unnecessary. Like this amount of detail about, what's happening here. You tell me, is it necessary to see this level?
I mean, I think it's helpful. I think you will get the question, the sort of general question, what did you cut as a result of our budget cut last year? But I think what you were saying is incredibly helpful. It's helpful to see the big numbers. And then to me, it's impactful when then you split it up into fixed costs. Like these are things we cannot cut. We're not gonna, unless you want us to cut headcount.
Right.
Or benefit, like 85%, like the Board of Ed budget, 85 or 90% of it is fixed and we can't touch. So we're really working along the margins here. So what ends up getting cut is programming. And I think there's a way to present that. And for me, at least as a visual and sort of tactile person, it makes sense to say, you know, we couldn't have had Chess Fest without it. I mean, I think those are real tangible things that you would have to cut that are popular to make some sort of impact.
Okay.
And so I think that's impactful. I don't think there's much confusion about the level of use of the library. I think that is particularly with respect to town council and the way that Mike runs meetings, he likes it to be super efficient and numbers driven. So I don't know that I think there's a feeling among some people that there's some obfuscation if you're not getting to the numbers and saying, this is what we asked for, this is what we got. How much of your operating budget is town money versus gifts and the annual fund? I think there's a ton of confusion
About that.
about how much you raise, how much you use of that. I mean, I do. I think it's not been laid out in a very black and white way for people. So there's this idea of like, there's this pot of money that is just sitting there that's raised from the community. And so I think it's a balance. I think we're all kind of sold on the library's use and
So de-emphasize that and go more to the numbers.
you know, I
Well,
think there's a way.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on everything Hillary's saying. I don't think there's anybody on town council who does not value this incredible resource we have in town. I think we're all so proud of, I mean, the brand new building, the programs, the activity, the traffic in there, it is awesome. It's a wonderful thing. And it's one of the things that people love about New Canaan, and New Canaan does these things. It's a great town. You'll remember, Ellen, that we coalesced 70 odd questions down into 14 and sent them to you last November. I think if we could get written answers to those questions, Hillary and I could present those to the town council well in advance of the budget decision making, so that if there are any questions left in terms of what you're requesting in the fiscal year 26 budget, we can have that conversation long before the 11th hour. And so that's really what we're looking for. This program stuff is fascinating, but I think what I'm looking for and the rest of the town council members are looking for is answers to those questions that we sent to you in November. And if we can get that, I think people will get a lot more understanding and feel a lot more comfortable going forward.
Well, we promised that to you in February. I'm hoping we're about, I think, maybe 50% of the way there. So we've had a big week this week. So it's a job one tomorrow to revisit that with everyone. We'll do our best to get it to you. I'm hoping maybe by the end of next week.
Oh, that
Thanks.
would be amazing.
And I watched the selectmen meeting. So I know your total budget is $4,035,500, and you're seeking town funding of $3,013,500,
Correct.
which is a $222,000 increase over last year. So in a town like New Canaan with what was the total last year? The total budget, $170 million budget.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a whole lot of money here, but you add up 200,000 here, 200,000 there, pretty soon it starts adding up to real money. And, the selectmen in their meeting yesterday were cutting $2,000 here and $500 there. So, they're taking a fine tooth comb to things. So that's, I think understanding the answers to all those numbers questions would be great. Everybody's sold on the library. We just need to understand, what that $222,000 is going to cover and why it's necessary.
Okay, we'll do some work to make sure that that's got greater clarification up front. Less babies and children photos. I hear you.
Yeah, and I think there was specifically, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, there was specifically questions surrounding the town's contribution to your fundraising budget. And so I think that was kind of the anchor of the cut was questions about that weren't sort of satisfactorily answered. I personally don't think so. I think that's an area where it could be explained in the simplest way possible about why the town is contributing to what sounds like to people you raising money from private sources. why does the town?
Well,
And I,
that's not how it works.
no, I know,
No,
but that's
not
the
how it works at
perception.
all.
That's the
they-
perception is all I'm saying.
Again, the libraries, if you look at the staffing, well, unless you're complaining, unless the board, the town council is saying, you've got two people on your staff who raise money and we don't want to pay for it. Is that what they're saying?
That's a great question. I think they.
Eric, is that what they're saying?
It was.
Because we don't know
yeah.
what they're saying.
It was presented more, and Eric, I'll let you jump in, as like, is the town paying for? This was a quote, I seem to remember, parties that only a select group of the community get to attend. That was the perception that wasn't necessarily corrected, that I think needs to be
And
corrected.
that goes right against, charging for everything. So which way do they, which way do you want it?
Yeah,
Can I ask a question? So
I voted against the budget, so I just want to be clear.
everyone's understanding is that the town council cannot dictate how that grant is spent. Second,
Yeah.
but it sort of seems from at least my perspective, and I think it's helpful that we've narrowed it down to 14 questions, but these questions seem to be geared towards dictating how that money is spent.
And I do also, a few years back, know that Lisa had, when she presented her budget, had taken a broader view, and there was some pushback from town council that they wanted more detail. So that's why all of these line items, as we budget them, are in there.
Yeah.
That was as a specific
Now, there's
request.
nothing wrong. But
Yeah.
per se,
Yeah.
as part of the presentation. But one of the things that, when I was on the board, the library board, we thought about doing this, we never did it, but to separate the two budgets, the operating budget and the fundraising budget, and allocate the cost of, to those two buckets, so that in fact, you can then say, well, we raise $800,000, but the cost of raising 800,000 costs us 200. So the net is 6, because these two people cost X dollars and some overhead. And so this budget here, results in 600 grand. This other budget here, our operating budget, actually has a deficit because, it's X dollars, the town gives us X dollars minus 200. And so doesn't quite match. And so the money that we raise here goes over. So this is how it actually works, but we never got around to representing it that way. But mentally, that's how I think you have to think about it.
Let me answer first from a board perspective to that very point, and then Cheryl and Ellen may give kind of day-to-day the practical. We've almost gone 100% against that. And part of that, when we were very excited, and we haven't talked about the transition, but to get these two in place and part fungible money, Ellen 2 years ago would have 100% sat in fundraising. Now, what do we do with their salary? Do we move it in the middle? But part of what we hope have been responsive to town is two things. One, that kind of how we're thinking about these programs is horizontal across everything the library is doing. And part of that can raise money sometimes, and part of it can just be for the town, but they shouldn't be in two different islands because they're both using the auditorium. They're both leveraging our staff. And so part of what I think Ellen and Cheryl have done a great job is having a lot of consistency across that. And as the chair, I don't want us to put 100% fundraising here, and that has this bow on it, and all of our other programming is different. I'm thrilled how much Ellen and Cheryl, but Ellen has transitioned to this broad program. So little long-winded, I don't want us to go that way. Even though it might be clear to look at the numbers, I think functionally it would make the library worse.
I think also the term fundraising is deceptive, and it's very much a function of an accountant approach, because what's really in fundraising isn't merely the exchange, it's relationship building. There's also a great deal of communications and marketing, and it's all the strategy about what we're doing and why, and linking it back to the mission of the library. These are not separate endeavors. Fundraising is core and part of what we as an association library are doing. So there isn't a distinction.
So the question then is that, okay, so accepting your argument, and it's a good argument, kind of the same argument that we went around with a decade ago when I was on the board. But so the question is to our colleagues on town council is how do we get around this issue
It's timing.
that comes up
In the-
with, that comes up with, oh, we don't want to fund their fundraising.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
there's a
I don't
timing.
understand that. I mean,
Yeah.
shouldn't the town as an as an entity say, if we can get $100 for 70 cents, shouldn't we, encourage them to raise the other 30?
Or even beyond that, let's give more money so they can raise more money.
Yeah.
I think from just speaking for myself, I don't really understand what the difference is between a fundraising expense and a library operating expense. So maybe that just needs to be clarified. I understand, Rob, what you said, and I think it makes perfect sense. From my perspective, as a town council person, and as somebody who's allocating taxpayer dollars, most of my concern and interest and where most of my questions lie is, okay, what's the total budget for the library, regardless of what you're spending it on? What's the total budget? How are you spending that money? And how does the expenditure of those funds compare to our neighbor libraries and our neighboring towns? Are we spending too much in this area, not enough in that area? And what are the causes for increase? I already know that your per kilowatt hour charge is going from 29 cents up to 36 cents. So that's going to be a pretty big chunk of additional expenditure next year. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm confused about fundraising activities and fundraising expenses versus operating activities and operating expenses. I mean, fundraising is an operation of the library. So maybe I'm naive, but that's where I am.
Thanks, Eric. That's right. That's how we view it.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, we're spending money to host events. We're self-funding. So if we're planning for a literary luncheon, the only upfront cost we have is the 50% deposit on the author. And everything else, we pay bills after the event, funded by the fundraising that we took in. So
yeah, and when I see a Naomi Watts is coming, I want to see people charged to go to that because I don't think the town should be fun. Yes, that's where my concerns lie.
So one of the questions on your 14 is how are decisions made? So I'm happy to talk about that. That was my decision. There are certain people like Naomi or Lydia Bastianich, you just have that, you have an opportunity where people are not going to feel that it was inappropriate to charge for that experience. I mean, we've had some experiences, frankly, where people have said you could have charged for that. I do hear that because our level of programming, and it's not only celebrity, of course, but it's at such a high level. People appreciate value, but we need to be careful because it really is not part of a library's ethos that you are charging people for, coming here and there. And I know that's very different because I'm a member of the for-profit community for 12 years of my career. I understand where that impulse comes from, but that is not a library's mission and role. It's a little hard to understand. We are definitely in the vanguard here. We are pushing the envelope when we get to look at some of our fundraising numbers compared to other people. You'll see that reflected. We took in $1.4 million last year of charitable gifts. That's extraordinary for a town of 20,000 people.
I think it's really important to remember that fundraising is not just income from fundraising events, right? The majority of the
annual
money
fund
that we bring in is donations from people who appreciate what we do for the community.
Yes.
That's our annual fund.
That's right. It's a 2/3, 1/3 split. So 1/3 is events and 2/3 are from the direct interactions we have with annual fund. Smaller percentages from things like grants.
Dollars,
Smaller, yeah.
but
from-
how many individuals?
Yeah, we get $5 donations, Eric, and then we get $25,000 I mean, it runs the gamut, and we have to both appreciate and honor and steward all of those gifts.
And isn't there a balance that you'd want to strike between, I mean, if you start charging for every event, even if it's $1, even if it's $5 just to hold your place, people are already, as taxpayers of New Canaan, we're contributing
Yes.
to how much, 70% of the operating expense, 60%
That's right.
Yes.
of the operating expenses.
70%.
And then you charge. So I have very little motivation to donate every year.
Absolutely. There
Right,
is
and-
100% of correlation.
And so I do think that that's an important point, that this is, you know, I grew up in a town where the town paid for 100% of the library. We didn't have programs like we have here. And the libraries have evolved and become a different thing than just going in and checking out a book. But the library when I was in high school was the hub, was like the social hub when it was rebuilt. So I think, I don't know if there's a way to quantify the return on investment that we're getting as taxpayers and townspeople. You know, my husband and I also moved to this town because of the experience I had at the old library. So I think to the extent that this is an anchor in our community, like, and then we have the Playhouse at sort of the other end and this great Elm Street downtown, you know, it's hard to quantify, but you know, to the extent we try to make a distinction between who visits here from other towns versus New Canaan, or we try to bifurcate that or charge for out-of-town people for programming, you know, that could dissuade someone from coming and using this beautiful library and then discovering the town and wanting to move here, which is hard to, it's so hard to quantify that. And I don't know that you can. But it's all part of the story, I think, of the return on investment that this provides our town. And
Yeah,
I think,
I completely agree, which is why I think we just need to look at all the numbers and figure out
Yeah,
how we
yeah.
compare to our neighbors and what
Yeah.
we're getting for that. What you're showing in this presentation is we're getting a hell of a lot for what we've invested. I mean, traffic is way up and people love the programming. So there's no question that there's a qualitative return on investment. The quantitative ROI is going to be a lot harder.
We did an economic impact study before the building was built and showed $6 million of additional receipts to the downtown community just for having built the library alone. And I think that was a powerful analysis. We haven't had a follow-up to that. It's really, you know, not something we're going to be doing, but, you know, I think it's not for Naomi Watts. I know for a fact that there were people that you couldn't get a seat in any of the restaurants downtown last night because everybody was having dinner after the event. And that's anecdotal evidence, which I've seen play out many times here. So.
Can I just make two comments?
So we could put a library tax on restaurant. That's a joke. That's a joke.
So I wanted to address what you said, Chris, looking at the delta, right? When I was looking at these budgets, that's what I used to look at, really, to start out with. 20,000 foot, you know, just kind of looking at a compilation as opposed to getting into the nitty-gritty. I think that's really important for each one of the Board of Finance and certainly Town Council, and certainly the Board of Selectmen. I think it is important, though, to sort of still look at the zero-based budgeting model. I mean, you need to have those numbers in it. And maybe what I used to do is just ask specific questions about something like that. If I saw something was either up or down too much, or it just didn't look out of. Right? So, Chris, I think what you're saying is great, because I think that does level set what is being asked for this current year over year. So that's one. So I applaud that. The second, though, and put my liaison hat on for those people. Is this on video or is this?
It will be
Okay,
uploaded.
so
It's available.
Doug and I are the Town Council library liaisons, and what I feel with that hat on is I really want to thank Hillary, thank you, Eric, and whoever else was instrumental in having this dialogue, right? And I think this is important this year for this budget because it's a sea change from last budget, right? When I hear these questions about last year, well, we didn't know this, or it wasn't explained to us, and this was this, and that's why we took the money out of the budget. I would hope that, you know, Doug and I were there to answer those questions as liaisons between the two boards, which I think would have been very constructive. Unfortunately, it wasn't because no one asked us to opine. And I think we could have served the purpose that Doug and I feel we've sacrificed our time and the rest for. Unfortunately, it wasn't. So I hope this year is really the difference that we're hearing in this discussion today. I think it is incredibly constructive. I think the questions that you presented, although I think it was 60 now, still to 14.
Yeah.
We really appreciate that, Doug and I, and certainly the library. I mean, Ellen and Cheryl going through those, and you're really the right ones to answer those, not Doug and myself. We're not to that granular level. But, you know, at the risk of being redundant, I hope this is a different year, and I hope everybody gets the information that they need. And if they don't get it, before we have the 11th hour issue again, let's get together and have that information, that dissemination of information there, because that was very unfortunate. Me as a taxpayer, me as a liaison, forget about sort of the board of the library, I was very disappointed because I sat there during that meeting with the town council and there were no questions asked.
Right.
Literally no questions asked. And that was unfortunate because I think it was in some respects an embarrassing moment. Again, this is Mark DeWilly talking, not the board talking. And I really appreciate Eric, Hillary, and anyone else who has facilitated this type of dialogue. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And we appreciate it. I think more sunlight on anything is better. I think being just asking the questions, and we're trying, there's an effort to not have that kind of surprise again. I think everybody on town council is aware that that wasn't ideal, far from it. And there are those of us who really endeavored to not have that. And I think that last year was not our greatest moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Totally
agreeing
acknowledge
I'm agreeing with everything you've said, Mark and Hillary, and really this is, you know, getting you guys the questions and starting this dialogue is something that Mike Morrow as the chairman has championed and encouraged Hillary and me to do, and I'm really glad that Hillary and I are working together to have these conversations. This is extremely helpful to me, and I hope it'll be extremely helpful to the rest of town council.
It's extremely helpful to both Cheryl and I, and from this point forward, we'll call this the redemption tour. So let's go, let's do the next,
So let's go back to the prior slide.
this side.
Yes. So I think you need to redo these.
Okay, okay.
Because we spent a lot of time, this is what got the whole presentation off track. And then we went into this big discussion, which has been very helpful, but you won't have that luxury either in front of the boards.
Mhm.
They're gonna, you're gonna have to go right through. You've got 35 minutes, whatever it is, and then 10 minutes of questions, and that's it. So you've got to redo these charts. You've got to explain the story, however you decide to explain it. But it's, given the feedback you've heard today, you've got to rethink some of these charts.
But is it, I'm also hearing it's helpful to see that in comparison to our neighbors, our spending is 4 out of 5. We're not wildly spending, right? I mean, isn't that useful information to see visually?
I think it is, but I think what Chris is saying is, and Chris, correct me if I'm not hearing you right, but I think what he's saying is, like, here's our nut for the year. Here's what the town gave us last year. Here's what we spent, and here's the difference. And we had to make these cuts. This year we're proposing X. We're asking for, 72% of X from the town. And that represents an increase of Y over last year. And here's why we need it.
I agree. We find 2 points here. The bridge was difficult
Yeah.
and the actual fiscal year budget is not clear. We should show you that. Comparison is 1 point, check, move on quickly.
Yeah.
And then go over specifically what was our fiscal year 24, fiscal year 25, and what are we asking for in 26?
Yeah.
So they're right.
So it's 2 slides, not 1.
But yeah, trust you guys to rejigger these slides so that the story is clearer.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm asking, actually, do you want to see this comparison to our?
I think we should.
Put an asterisk there, how we filled that gap.
Yep.
Because I think that is something that's even very profound, because this is, you can't run a business. Can't run a business where you're taking things out of a pot that's not replenished to do this.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you asked the question, how did we adjust the budget? One other big area that we took money from, we took $30,000 out of our technology budget. And the reason we did that was because I had an opportunity that I turned out to be correct about with a distant donor who was willing to support the funding for the public computers. Now, we took our old public computers from our old building
We still have.
and we still have them, and they're right there, and they're used every single day, so we did not invest in new computers for the public. But we have come upon a time where it's, computers don't last in the public, it's time. And so I was able to get a donor to provide us with that funding. That is not a repeatable event. And that is not a game plan for business.
But do you have these comparative numbers for like total budget ask, total operating expenses, what they fund? I mean,
No, that's because that's not public.
It's-
I don't have their line
Okay.
budget for Darien. I only have the aggregate audited numbers.
okay, okay.
That's from.
Yeah, just piggybacking on something, I can't remember exactly who said it, maybe Mark, maybe Ellen, obviously you've hinted it. I think the comparable stuff is really helpful. I do think charts like this one are helpful to show where we stand relative to the rest. But you put that with the entire budget, I think that's better. The questions, the 14 questions from town council, did you say we'll get that by the end of February or by the end of January?
We promised it to you in February. I am endeavoring to get it to you by the end of next week, but there are several authors, so I can't commit to everybody's
No,
ability.
That's
Trying.
fine. I had in my notes end February and I was sure it was sooner than that. So that's fine. Thank you.
Definitely before the end.
Can we address, this might be a hypothetical question that may not come up. But if it were to come up, the question would be, well, library, we cut your budget last year. You were able to raise the money and to fill the gaps. So that worked out for everybody. Why would, you know, not
Well, for the
redo it
reasons,
again?
I just said to you, these are not sustainable solutions. And we do need to be able to pay appropriately for replenishing our technology needs here. We can't rely on donors to make those really important investments in our ability to operate. This is not something where there's, variable and fixed costs, Chris, right? So the variable components are things like we can reduce monies that are spent on programs. We just are doing less of what people are asking us for. But for public computers where literally they stop working and, technology advances at such a high rate, we must make those investments. We can't not pay our water bill, but we go to the things where we can make some adjustments. And I can tell you, we operated on a monkish ascetic kind of a budget when Lisa was here, now that I've really taken a hard look at it. And we have really got a very disciplined approach to how we budget and spend money. This is not a profligate team. So when we say we need the $30,000 to be put back into a technology budget, it's a real number.
So it's kind of like-
A great question. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, it's sort of like infrastructure versus like needs versus wants, right? That these are things that
We must have.
we need to
We
have.
have to pay the town their WAN fees, et cetera.
Chris, I think your questions are great because that is in people's minds.
Yes.
Right? I would come at this a little bit differently. I think there's a finite amount of donated dollars in this town. And if the library, which we sort of have we're the shiny penny, if you will.
Mhm.
And if we keep, overreaching and taking more of that finite donated dollar, it's going to take away from other very, very worthwhile
Yeah.
entities in town. I mean, I remember,
Point.
at Stanford Hospital, we've raised a lot of money and we've done very well over the years, but at the same time, we have to give a place for other institutions in Stanford and communities around the hospital that let them be able to raise funds as well. That part of it is missed a lot of times in these not-for-profits.
That's a wonderful observation. And I hope you please find a way to insert that in
Yes,
your commentary.
Thank you,
Because that is absolutely an important point that it's not thought of very often. And so it affects the theater,
yes. We talk about
all
it.
the facilities,
Park and Rec.
Park and Rec, the Cottonwood Field, all these people that want money. Like I said, there's a finite pot. The library does have a lot of flashing lights around
Right,
it,
we do.
but like you say, it's a finite pot every year. It's not going to go up.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never apologize for being good at what we do, but it is very much my concern that we take our turn.
And you get the pushback from people that say, gee, this year I'd like to help you, but I really am going to do something for the powerhouse.
Yeah, and I salute that, because why not?
Or I've got to do something for the athletic foundation, or, because they can't just write a check every year to everybody.
We had that very conversation with a lot of the nonprofits, of course, all of whom are our partners in various forms of programming here. As a member of this community for 23 years, I am also personally very conscious that we need to take turns. And so even when it comes to things like, let the cat out of the bag, let's talk about the legacy building for a moment. people want there to be fundraising for that. Well, I have a great deal of hesitation on how that is going to be approached because I am well aware that there are other organizations in town that need to mount capital campaigns, Waveney amongst them, the Nature Center perhaps, even the Glass House, right? And so we take a very community-minded approach, and I am very conscious of that. And I really thank you, Mark, for raising that point because it is part of the thinking here.
Yeah, that is a very important thing, and I think, even addressing the legacy building issue so that it doesn't. Let the cat out of the bag, tell them the truth, tell them, we're gonna get to it, but we have to wait our sequence our turn in here. You
Yeah,
can't
well,
just
there's more
grab all
that. Yes.
We just raised quite a bit of money to build this, right? We have to understand it.
Not only that, I mean, to be fair, preserving it was an unfunded mandate from the town.
Absolutely.
So, and I think to Mark's point, unlike other sort of nonprofits or people who want your donations, except for the Nature Center, I think there is also the psychology of, but taxpayers are paying 60 to 70% of the operating expenses, whereas at other nonprofits, they're not doing so. And at the Powerhouse, you have to buy a ticket. It's not like it's open to the public. So you guys are in a it's a nuanced position
Yes.
that you're in fundraising, I think.
Yeah,
Because,
we're provided a grant to supply a service that the town has requested.
well,
And
and that the
that-
town
and that-
uses,
and
and that
that
everybody
helps.
here uses and contributes to.
Yeah.
Some people will say, I've given my part as a taxpayer here.
Right.
You're gonna get that from people that you might want to raise money from. And to your point, if you have a finite pool, if you have a finite budget that you're trying to make as a family, you might say, well, my taxes go towards the library anyway, so I'm gonna take that and give it to
Yeah.
the Powerhouse this year.
We have 1,100 annual fund donors between 1,100 and 1,200. That's not, we have 8,000 households. So
There's also, probably 95% of libraries and public libraries in this country are municipal libraries.
Yes.
A lot of people don't realize when they're coming to this town that the library is a nonprofit and,
Yeah.
and does,
And if the library exists, the town would still be responsible for providing library service.
That's right.
at 100 cents on the
that's exactly right.
That's correct.
I might choose to offer, an inflated dollar, so, a lesser product, but it'd be nonetheless responsible for funding golf.
We've been at this for almost 150 years. I think you probably want us to be doing it.
And, this is a wonderful deal for the town.
Great.
This building, for 25 cents on the dollar, it's a magnificent building.
That's how we feel. I think
That's
a
how
lot
we
of people
feel.
feel that way, and I think it's a huge win, and I would own it, and I would not be defensive about what you provide because it's a great service. I think having somewhere that middle schoolers and teens feel comfortable coming to after school is so important in this town.
It's important.
And you built it and they came and nobody was telling them this is where you have to go. They've chosen to
Yeah.
come.
Um,
It is,
But
and it's great. I love to see it. And my daughter's in 6th grade, so she has some more independence. And I said to her yesterday, all right, you have a half day. Why don't you go to the library and do your homework? And she was like, yes, because she can be here and I feel safe
feel
that she's
safe,
here.
yeah.
Even if she then goes to walk around town, it's a safe
many
space.
Trying to get the teen center going.
Right.
It's really not a facility for kids to go to. This is definitely it.
But I think the legacy building will have to be addressed, and I think, you have to own it and just say, listen, it wasn't a part of our original plans, and the town said that we needed to preserve it, which we've done, we preserved it. And right now, particularly given, I don't know if you want to say about the budget cut last year, but your fundraising is going towards what the broader community is demanding, which is programs and
Yeah.
things like that.
excellent point.
Right, and that's where it is right now, and you would love to do a fundraising effort, and if somebody wants to partner with you to do that, then it's something you could consider, but right now, for the people who pushed for it, maybe it's time they put their money where their mouth is, and
Yeah, and we're
Keep
trying to
fundraising.
budget money for a custodian because of the
that's,
increase.
yes,
That's where we are, the increased usage of the existing
The
building.
immediate need is, the building will stay where it is. It's not gonna fall down. I don't think all the bats in town are gonna move in, so I think you're okay. In the meantime, if you look at the custodian here, this building's gonna start really showing wear and tear. So,
and I think that's a perspective, right? That what you're asking for, what your increase is, or your increased ask is not for something that is like, oh, wildly privileged. Like, a lot of it is.
Yeah, I like the words, Ellen, you've used it several times, sustainable. The increase you're requesting is so that you can reach a sustainable level of support and operation. And
Yeah,
I
and-
agree with Hillary. I think you do have to address the legacy building, but I think the best answer is we don't have an answer for that right now. We're maintaining it because the town or many people in the town wanted us to keep it, and it is where it is, but there are no plans to request money from the town to do something neat and cool with that building. I don't think there's a lot of appetite on town council to fund turning that building into anything that'll cost a lot of money right now.
Understood. I do have a slide on it. It's all the way at the end in the appendix, so we'll have to figure out where that goes and if we address it head on, but I hear you loud and clear.
Well, you probably have to address it because it's always there.
It's not part of our operating budget,
I
though.
would
That's the
say
problem.
it would be a.
That's why it's in the
calculus,
appendix.
probably. So
No,
that would,
it's not.
but they're gonna add, it's gonna be.
It's out, if you don't address it, it'll be talked about in.
Okay, I'll put it up higher. I'll show it to you when we get, I'm just gonna keep going.
Okay.
Here's another slide that shows where we are. We don't have to land for any detail here. It's the same idea. Our children's team is doing so much with so little. It's incredible. And the answer to why they're able to do so much is because they're doing it themselves. So Darienne's budget, look, it's like 3 times the size of what our children's team are doing. They're teaching those classes themselves. They are qualified themselves. They are amazing. Our meeting spaces, again, this is an area where we have really, we're prescient. Pre-COVID planning, and now the entire world is coming here every day to use our spaces. Collections is another area that we did cut, and Cheryl, you might want to briefly talk about this, but this is an area we have to really consider making the big investment because we are really behind our peers when it comes to particularly our digital assets. And here's just, we talked about this in the Board of Selectmen, but for Hillary and Chris's benefit, Cheryl, do you want to?
Yeah, so our digital budgets have not increased in over many years, but the usage has doubled. And we've hit a ceiling. So the demand is way more than our budget currently supports. So people are having to wait 6 months for any ebook, e-audiobook that they want, and that's just not the way that people expect to engage with our library, and they're discouraged, and it's not great service, and it doesn't make us feel good. And the reason for that is because the digital license terms for libraries everywhere in the country are egregious. So we pay 5 to 6 times what a personal ebook would cost, as opposed to our print books. We get a discount, right, for volume. So it's difficult.
It's a nationwide problem. There's a big advocacy piece to this. We are the cash cow now for the publishing industry. Cheryl and I can't solve it on our own, but what we can solve is that we are not going to be, in a position where we are really causing some disheartening conversations and discouragement among the people that are supporting us when, because what happens when you hear you have to wait 6 months for a book, you're not waiting.
And we've actually had to, we've had to reduce our service. We have 2 digital services. We have Libby and Overdrive, which is a one copy, one license model. So like you buy a book, you buy a digital license, only one person can have it at a time. So we pay for an ebook $75 for that license of that ebook, and then it expires after 2 years. That's the term that the publishers have set for us. And digital books are limited only to New Canaan residents. So this is only New Canaan cardholders, and in every town that is the case.
I had no idea there were just like an unlimited number.
No, people don't know.
books that you could check it. I mean, I think of it as like a Kindle.
Yeah.
Where you just go and download the book and it's so that's an important, because I actually had no idea that it was one copy,
People don't.
one electronic copy, as if you were checking out the physical book.
So that's with Libby Overdrive, which is our one model. Our other model is Hoopla, which is more like that. It's like a Netflix model. So we purchase into the library of offerings that they have. So they don't have everything. They don't have the women, you know, they don't have the books that everybody
Current
are
titles,
looking to
fresh to
read at the time. But we then, the library, pay per borrow. So every time somebody clicks download this title from Hoopla, we are charged. So we limit per month.
In order to
We set
manage that
a-
variable expense, which
Sure.
could be unlimited.
But more and more people, as more and more people borrow digitally, we've had to reduce the number of borrows so that we can stay within our budget. People are not happy about it.
Which is unfortunate, because you're having to reduce
We have
service.
to reduce
Yeah,
service.
it's a
to-
reduced service.
That's what happened.
Service.
That's what happened with the cuts last year.
So how does the patron see it?
They see it as they can only borrow 5 books versus they used to be able to borrow 8 or 9.
Oh, I see.
Per month.
So when you go in, you get the fifth book, it says this is your last book this month.
Yep.
Correct.
I say.
Yeah. And people who are used to borrowing 8 per month,
That's amazing service.
which is a lot.
You know, I mean, I don't get charged things, and it's not, I just keep spinning these books on that.
But it's the same thing as with the print, right? People who read heavily, if they had to purchase every book from the library, they would be spending hundreds of dollars per month. We do that. That's what the library does.
that's
We
what-
just do it digitally as well.
And you feel that that's a way to,
We have no control over the economics of it, other than we can send.
But the ebooks, I think I remember from the selectmen meeting, the ebook costs about 5 times what a print book costs.
So this falls under that category of charging for things that are literacy. Like, this is just not the
Yeah.
ethos. It's just not the ethos of the library.
That's absolutely, we could not do it. People can go ahead and buy, you know, a Kindle subscription.
Yes.
That's what they.
It's this changing evolution of library in the world. We're meeting our public where they are at this point. We are being responsive, which is our job, to how the public is engaging with our materials. And so this is just one piece of it, but it's a growing piece. And we, in order to create that sense of satisfaction and delight that frankly translates into people wanting to be supportive of us, we need to do a better job than we're doing. And we need to shrink that wait time from 6 months down to something that's, you know, I don't know what the correct.
Yeah, I mean, so
Level.
our ask is an $18,000 increase in this line. This year to try and get those terms down to about half the wait list. But I will also
Yeah,
say,
explain why that's $18,000 in
Yeah.
that.
I don't think 5X is even the right number, because when we buy a book, we have it for the life of the book.
Yeah.
The others are 2-year subscription.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
You
think
can't
how
get
many
through the
times you could take that book out over 10 years, right?
the wait list won't get filled before we have to repurchase. Yeah, on popular books, which is, there's about 60 books,
I
right?
can see
That
the
have
argument,
over.
You know,
over
50 to 20X difference.
Yeah. But the other point to this is our digital budget has not increased in like 10 years.
Darien's budget is 3 times ours. They spend, what is the number?
It's doubled. I have two, there's this two.
I always say it's 3.
We do.
I believe it's 3. It's,
at least 2.
251,000.
and ours
Ours
was,
is 113. It's
includes databases. So we also have a slight increase for a database, additional database this year, which we need.
I think any comparisons like that, to Eric's point, are super helpful.
Okay.
And I think
You're not
that's-
fine.
and if you have numbers on how we're not meeting necessarily the community's demand for ebooks
Yeah.
and how that, you know, I happen to love books piled up, I
Yeah.
find,
Mhm.
but a lot of people
It's
really,
like my wife.
They do.
yeah,
So there's a library and a bookstore. Bookstore can hold on to that book until you need it. She has like 12 books.
yeah.
I mean,
It's like art to me though.
It's not like, you know, FIFO. It's not first in, first out.
Yeah.
She looks at it, I'll take this
Yeah.
one. So.
Yes.
I digress.
I have piles of books, piles, I love that, I like, it's very
You know,
comforting.
she
to
helped me,
have.
The A starting to do.
Like I like a book, but I know I had a Kindle and I was like, I can't.
This is a great conversation for us to have because
Yeah.
there's so much knowledge that still needs to be translated. And it's also the nitty gritty of how we're thinking and what's happening and what is happening in library. Right? We're not unique in this.
There is legislation that comes up every year at the state, and this is about the 4th or 5th year it's gonna come up again, and it's, you know, publishers have a substantial.
These discussions are support of Chris, Hillary and Eric here, because when that is brought up with Board of Finance or Town Council, you will know what the answer is. So if Cheryl or Ellen say something, yes, you know, and you could just add on, and then I think your compatriots will really better understand and be more supportive. It's not us saying.
That's the purpose of these liaison meetings,
Yeah.
is that for the liaisons to understand the budget in great detail and all the ins and outs, and be able to be champions of whatever that budget is to the boards that they run, so.
And also to Chris, to Hillary's point earlier, Mike wants the town council meetings to be much more streamlined. There's no reason, Ellen and Cheryl, you should have to make this exact presentation 3 separate times and answer all the same questions from the selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the town council. We should be able to, Hillary and I should be able to preempt a lot of these questions so that when you come to town council, it's not answering every single question all over again that you've already answered twice. And also, we really want to avoid the 11th hour decision-making and cutting.
Thank you very much for
Well,
that.
Yeah.
the way we do that is to coach them on how the presentation is given. So
Right,
drop this, add this,
yes.
rethink this, so that by the time it gets to the Board of Finance and to Town Council, that presentation that was originally given to the selectmen has been changed and modified and improved,
Mhm.
streamlined, you know, so that's it's to the point, it's hard hitting, it's right there. And, you know, then if there are other issues that come up, then you've got advocates sitting on these.
Yeah,
things, say,
time.
well, we've heard the detail, here's the answer, you know.
And I think Eric, Josh, who works in the
Yep.
finance department, the way he does his presentation, it's sort of analog. It's not like fancy but he provides slides that are like, okay, for this department, we're asking for X increase. It was this over this, and these are the drivers. And it's really straightforward and easy to digest the way he does that, I think, because it's really efficient and it just tells you exactly what they're asking for and the basis for it. And somebody might say, I don't think that's a great read. I don't know. Eric, what do you think? You've been through the cycle now. I feel like Josh's presentation is really helpful because you get sort of a 30,000 view feet and then he goes through slides that are
Yeah,
in large for people.
yeah,
to
no,
digest.
it's great. It's great.
And
And like I said, having those numbers in front of
Yeah.
everybody is especially helpful.
Okay, loud and clear, I hear you.
Yeah,
Why don't we blow through then just a little bit? This energy was another big
Yeah.
topic that came up in certainly Board of Finance, but definitely at Town Council. There's some great learning that we've undertaken and an opportunity that we availed ourselves of to commission a study to ensure that it's actually called a commissioning.
Yeah, so these are our numbers in comparison of last year's full year numbers as opposed to the old building. So we used less kilowatt hours of electricity on all electric building versus our old building that had oil heating.
So
And
top line, our energy usage is down.
correct, but obviously the unit cost was up significantly from those years. But we also, this was not to the standards of what we had expected to see in terms of the electricity savings. So the next slide, we then underwent this commissioning exercise. We made some adjustments. And we had our solar fully come online. So this year, this is the 6-month run rate from what we've seen. So we've seen 30% savings in electricity usage from this year as opposed to the same 6-month from last year. So we're in a much better position, we think. We're seeing the savings, the energy usage savings that we were looking for. But, you know, Eversource, right? So we're hostage to that, just like everybody else is,
And
so.
Cost of electricity has gone up, even though you lose.
Exactly.
You use more of it.
But that percentage difference is gonna make a huge difference in total with the cost of the state going up.
Yeah.
Connecticut is the third highest cost of electricity in the country.
Yeah.
Hawaii, which is, as we all know, is an island, and the other is California, which
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're doing, but we're the third highest.
Yeah.
We don't have any nuclear, and our transmission rates are,
But we're also paying for the kind of the failed aspect of one of the big power commissioners. I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
that's right.
And I apologize, I've got to run to another meeting, so I apologize.
Thanks for being here. You.
Thank
I
you,
think
Mark.
that's an important, everybody's crunched under
Forget
their
your check.
electric bills, right?
Yes.
So I
You
think,
can
I think.
Thanks,
seeing
Mark.
that
At some point, Chris, but
That solar is fully going to be impacted.
It's impactful because I think the criticism was, well, you said you weren't going to have you were gonna have a equal, if not lower operating cost, and that was not the case in the first 6 months that we're operating,
Yeah.
but these are sophisticated systems. They require a lot of refinement, and we did it.
We're getting there,
We
yeah.
were getting there.
Yeah.
And it's that steady state, which we talked a little bit about last year, but we're there now, I think, to a greater degree.
And
So-
we would actually be saving money if the rate was the
Oh,
same
totally.
number as when you
Huge.
do this, and
We'd
yes.
be at a
right, right, right.
30% reduction in the,
Yeah, so, like,
Rates have stayed the same.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we would be running, it is running more efficiently. It's,
Yeah, you might even show that, say, and incidentally, what
Here's
we
my-
said, after we get this building shaken down, and running, we would have a saving. Well, if rates had stayed the same, here's where we'd be, but rates have not stayed the same. Some reasons which are out of our control. So that might be, just a little bullet point, this.
that was one of
Point.
Rita's questions last year during the budget process, was the energy costs and what you were doing. So I do think that's an important
Well,
thing to know.
we're trying to address it head on, so we'll try to
Great.
make sure we're very clear. This is just a breakdown of what, the aggregates are that we're asking for, and although the percentages look like just under an 8% increase, I think, one of the things we really should say, again, it's a one-time reset, and if we had not received the reduction last year, this would only be a 4% increase to the budget this year. I think that's important to note. Again, primary uses. No, I'm saying it orally. Compensation, collections, programs, and other. Here's the breakdown, because the total number is 291, which incorporates our fundraising component.
So this is the breakdown of the increase.
So under, where would like the digital, would that be under collections?
Yeah.
Okay. And then custodial and salary. So what's your head count right now? Can I ask that?
Yeah, so we're 23 full-time, and then we have another about 8 or 9 like part-time equivalents of a full-time. So we have like 20 part-timers that,
Okay,
some people work 6 hours.
sure.
Some people work. So another 8 or 9. So I think we're at like 32.
Darien has 10 more full FTEs than we do. Some other areas where we are asking for an increase,
The 8 FTE represents how many actual people?
20.
a lot of it's the shelvers, Chris.
Yeah.
People come in for a couple of hours and shelve.
And are these the proposed salary increases, would everybody be getting a bump, or is it particular positions that would be getting a bump?
So, subject to the discretion of the managers that you're seeing here,
Yeah.
but we believe that it would be a pretty equal distribution across the board.
And how long has it been since there's been any salary increase for anyone?
We had a cost of living increase last year that we
You had a
implemented.
COLA, okay. Okay. And is this above and beyond a cost of living increase, or is it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Good to know.
In addition to.
What about the cost of recruiting people? If you lose someone, you gotta go out in the market and buy somebody new.
That's right.
Well, we don't use a headhunting firm unless we're hiring CEOs, apparently.
I'm saying,
Oh, a great question. I'm gonna let Cheryl answer that.
Yeah, I mean, so we're currently hiring for a reference librarian position because we just had a retirement. So we're seeing, we're interesting right now. So, we've got this phenomenal facility. We've got a good reputation. People would like to work for us, but salary matters.
The
These are
starting
not
salary for a librarian is, we were at 58 last year. We did a bit of an adjustment. Last year, we were able to adjust people up a couple of thousand to get them to 61 for starting salary. This is
to try to get in.
to try to attract
in line with
people
our,
and our
the
peers.
lowest of our peer.
And this is somebody who has a master's in library science.
Masters in library science.
So you're getting a reputation and give you a little
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
easy.
salary is not,
very premium.
right, as if there's also a job open at Stanford, which is a union
Mhm.
library. They start
least 10 more.
$10,000,
10 more.
10 as the starting entry level.
And you can't live in New Canaan. Very difficult to live in New Canaan on a $60,000 salary. And again, 50% of our staff is the qualified librarian staff. There's the other 50%, which are also, we can also talk about those salaries as being not competitive.
So your retiring person, Mr. how much? How much was what was the price of that person? Versus-
Probably 18, it's 15 or 18 above the new level, I'm guessing, and something like that.
Okay,
We
so-
don't tend to talk about those things,
So
and I just did,
you can send in.
no less than that, less than that.
Well, then that's someone who worked for us for 15
No.
years. So we would-
So they're really benefits.
And Darien pays about $10,000 more for a full.
Westport,
yes, but Darien pays they're starting, I think they start at 67.
that was 10 above where now.
Yeah.
Last year it was 58.
Okay.
Again, I
Again,
think,
all good to know, all good
Yeah.
things to hear. I
Yeah.
think we're always constantly asking peer-to-peer, right, Eric? I think the peer-to-peer question is always really impactful.
Yep. Yep.
And our staff are fully aware of what everybody else is making at other libraries.
we're extra nice to them. What's the benefit, qualified benefit about that? We're extra nice.
And we try to offer other benefits.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm not joking, because one of the things that Cheryl and I feel very strongly, we want to make sure we can add to our budget this year is staff education.
Mhm.
We are below where we were years ago. And we were.
Another thing we cut last year.
And it's another thing we had to cut back. And so we're trying to go from, is it 7 and change up to 15?
But
and-
we were up at 12 a few years ago.
And that's well below our peers. I mean, I think some of those comparative numbers are
Darien's was 70.
$70,000 for staff education at Darien. We're trying to get to 15.
What are the components of staff education? Like, are they?
So some of it's attending conferences
Okay.
or being able to present at conferences, because of course, with our innovative team and truly innovative work that they're doing, they are often asked to present at some of these larger nationwide kinds of conferences. But just basic, training on whether it's new software, new programs, even Excel. We have in-house expertise in things like Excel and other stuff. You can imagine the demand for that kind of thing here.
Yeah, so you have 15 in your budget, and Darien, you said was how much?
70
So
something.
they spent 72 last year.
And on the starting salaries, you said Darien starting salary was how much? 67?
66 or 67,
And Stanford, which is unionized, is offering 71?
probably. I can get you those numbers. But
No, you should just have.
it's
them.
roughly there, yeah.
That question may come up.
Yeah, Westport also, they're
They're
unionized.
unionized.
Westport's also union?
Yes.
Even though they're an association library, they're not municipal, but they are a union library.
The other thing that we are going to talk about, which comes up on this slide, is sources of funding. And I think that speaks again to the flexibility that those institutions gain by having endowments. And so Darian's endowment, we can talk about this in detail, is $8 million. And everyone else has an endowment of substantial size except us. We are now under $1 million, largely because we had to spend so much of that money to help move the legacy building. It is a major priority for me and for the board to work on a plan to really bring us into up to par, so to speak, and give ourselves the advantage of what is that sustainable fundraising? Because if we have an expectation that our fundraising is going to grow at these levels, which again, the fundraising amount we're proposing in the budget is beyond what we're asking the town in terms of a percentage increase. Now it's not, it's roughly pari passu, but it's not, we're demanding more of ourselves than we're asking of the town. These are not sustainable numbers. And I can tell you that as the fundraiser here for the last 11 years, like we can't keep going.
Do you contribute to the endowment every year or like from any excess? Well, you don't have any.
We have, Hillary, we
But-
fund all of our own capital expenses. And so when we
Okay.
have a surplus, an operating surplus, the board has made decisions typically to put aside some funding so that we can fix an elevator or a roof. Now, hopefully, that's not going to happen here for a while. It's a new building, but in the last building, we had to spend $80,000 to repair an elevator where we had to have parts manufactured in Germany by hand for a 80-year-old elevator.
When we knew that we were gonna be building a new building in a
Yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah, so there,
Yeah.
the board authorized and the town had agreed to this arrangement. That every year it would put $50,000
Yeah.
aside in the capital fund.
Yeah,
And that grew, sometimes it would be hit because of the elevators would fall apart or the air conditioning would not work properly and the doors would fall off the building and other things like that.
Yes.
It was finally, I think, fully vacated though during the construction, right?
we, I think, did deploy some of that funding to move legacy. We're back up to about a 200, I think, in that account, but don't quote me. I'll have to
Okay,
get
so
back
you
to
do have a little reserve.
We do,
If something.
we do.
You know,
But you're asking the question, does that automatically go to the endowment? The answer is no. Of course, the board votes on anything
Yeah.
like
it
that.
was never in an endowment, it was
To
outside.
the,
Yes.
Capital account is separate from endowment.
Yes.
which is different than the capital campaign. Those words
Yeah.
trick people up.
Capital. Some very specific
I'm-
gifts.
Typically bequests.
Bequests from people and it had gotten to about $1.6 million or so.
No, it was over 2.
Was it over? Well, you had earnings.
Yeah, it was
I was
over
gonna
2.
say, do you,
We're now at 900 and change.
and you earn interest on whatever?
Yeah, it's in an appropriately managed account, yeah.
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 But we also have a bylaw, so understanding how that works. In our bylaws, I think it was when you were president, in fact, Chris, there's a rule that says we can't even touch any aspect of that endowment without until it hits $3 million.
Mhm.
So they had to take I don't know, extrajudicial vote, what is
Yeah,
it?
no,
In order to, utilize some of that money for legacy. But even if we wanted to take advantage of income, it would have to hit a $3 million threshold in a normal environment for us to utilize it. And even at 3 million, it has a very minimal impact on our budget. So in order for our budget to have an impact, we're looking at an 8-figure endowment. And so we have to now strategically plan for how are we going to get to that? Because to me, that's the goal. One part of the goal for me was building the building, getting the funding for the building. The other part of the goal in terms of setting us on an appropriate financial footing for sustainability in this community and to not have to tap into the community even deeper than we've already been doing. That endowment is the key piece of it. So,
And right now it's sitting at about.
right. And if you see this chart, looking at where others are, the sort of orangey color shows you the contribution to their operating budgets from their endowments. Obviously, Darian's is the greatest.
So orange is the town grant. It's the blue, no.
It's the orange.
Like the
You're talking
brighter
about dark
red.
orange.
Dark, yeah, sorry, coral.
But Darien seemed to be able, what they've chosen to do is take money from their endowment and not raise as much.
That's right.
That's correct. That's exactly right. And they do.
Supplements there.
That's right.
And they rely much more on the town to help them out.
But still, it's 75. It's just that it's still about 75, 25.
They still took 75%. Oh,
We were 70-30 last year. We had we had a 70-30 split. So town provided 70% of the budget and we contributed 30 at the end of the day. That was the audited result
Of 2000.
last year.
With additional fundraising than we
Yeah.
had originally. Here's an example of the town grant per capita. This is we're in the penultimate position, and it's a reflection of municipal investment per capita. Here's it as a percentage of revenues. Now the numbers, these are small numbers, but we are behind our peers. But we very deeply appreciate the grant that the town made to us for building this building, and we know that that was a stretch for our community, but I think it's been money well invested. The other thing to note, and we don't talk about it here, but I know it comes up a lot, is with the borrowing that we undertook, the town gave us access to that lending facility.
Yeah.
Against our pledge payments. You may know, Eric, I think we spoke about it in our lunch that we had. We were initially thinking that we might need up to a $13 million facility in order to meet payments to Turner to match up to pledges. We reduced that down to 10, and we've never borrowed over 4, and we're down to just a little bit over $2 million outstanding. And we're on a great path to repayment there. So we've really managed that extremely well. We've had a 0 default rate on pledges. That's going extremely well. There's very little risk in that scenario. And we're also very grateful for that because we were able to avail ourselves of a great interest rate.
Yeah.
So that's been helpful.
That facility was not reduced to 4 million?
No,
Stayed at 10?
it's a 10, but we only borrowed 4.
Yeah, because there was that whole conversation about the additional amount for, yeah.
Well, the town offered
Yeah.
to make it available for the legacy building, and said, you could reimburse.
You could, but there's no repayment plan for that. Like, there's no pledges against that. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you could have replenished your endowment. I mean, you could have,
We could have, but where would the funding then have come from? But there was no plan.
there was no plan, yeah.
Right, and I think
Yes.
that was a conscious decision that we're trying to match an income stream against a debenture effectively.
Yeah, so the problem would have been, had they borrowed the money from the town, they would have had a 10-year note that's sitting out there with no idea of how they were gonna pay it.
Yeah.
And so that's not very good planning. So at the end of the day, those conversations just kind of petered out.
Yeah, but we'd be happy to revisit that once we have a better idea and a grip on what we're looking to do going forward, and how it'll be used. So
Yeah.
I won't dismiss that. Here's a chart to show you how we did. Very proud of this.
I mean, that is impressive. I love these comparisons to peer towns. I think that this is helpful.
That is so useful. That's, gotta have that up from the front of the presentation. This goes
I'm
right,
balancing modesty with information.
Don't be
here.
modest.
no, this goes right to the issue
It's,
of, New Canaan is getting $100 value for 70.
yeah.
And it should be, this slide needs to be up front when you talk about these overall big picture items.
Sorry, I keep.
Don't you think?
Yes.
I mean, this is a very powerful slide.
Okay. And here's the anecdotes to support why people are able to feel so generous with us. And this is my absolute favorite one. We were voted the 3rd best place to be in town by Saks middle schoolers in their yearbook, right behind caffeine and ice cream. And I'm telling you, you can't beat that.
No.
We couldn't have asked for a higher rating.
That's great.
That's wonderful.
So.
Who'd have thought when they built the teen center that the number 1 spot other than Starbucks and ice cream would be the library? That's great.
And so in the appendix to the slides, which were not shown at the Board of Selectmen, we do have our full budget here. And we did provide a slide which talked about legacy. This was just a way to be responsive to questions, because again, we weren't sure how much emphasis in an operating budget to be placed on this. But a little update on what we've spent, a little bit of a sense of, okay, what are the parameters and the conditions precedent we're working within in order to even come to some decision making. I've been in this role as CEO since September, so we're trying to walk, chew gum, and paddle the canoe at the same time. We're getting there. I did conscript Steve Carl, as you heard, to help lead a committee, and I have every hope that there will be members of town council and others in the community get engaged with us to talk about what is highest and best use here. We want a really transparent and open process.
Yeah.
And something that's collaborative, but also where we've said to people, look, you know, it's a 1,200 square foot space. It's the size of your swimming pool. And we need 2 ADA bathrooms in there, each of which are going to be 7 feet by 7 feet. So the use limitations are real. And
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a lot of important things. That top line, 2.4 million spent to date. Just be prepared to answer, because I'm curious exactly what was that spent on and where did it come from?
yep, it was spent on,
We had to move a Mason.
We had to build-
Oh, I know moving the building, but I don't know how much was spent on moving the building, just, you know.
we built the railroad that moved the building, and then we had to support the building, and we can show all those bills.
Yeah, you should
Yep.
show
A
a
breakout.
little breakout.
Yep.
It was all funded through.
It was not funded through capital campaign funding. It was funded by ourselves and our endowment. That's right.
So they rated down to do this.
Rated the endowment. That's the word I'm going to use, Chris. If you say that's a word I should use. Yeah.
Sure.
This is an example comparison also of the endowment, again, to show you the distinction. This was from 23, so it's 800. We did do pretty well in the market, so it's above 900 now, but I'll just let you know that Greenwich has a $26 million endowment.
Yeah.
So, and so that's our presentation. I'm gonna stop the share because now you can see us.
This is
But
great.
I hear you loud
I
and clear
think,
about-
I think that the conversation has been really helpful for me and for Hillary and certainly for Chris. And I'm guessing that, I'm assuming that Hillary and I will knock heads and be able to talk with folks on town council well in advance of decision-making, so that everybody will have answers to questions and go in eyes wide open.
Thank you. The main thing I really just want to convey that we're trying to solve for is there's a lot of pressure on the system here to meet the demand, and what we're feeling is pressure on our staff to turn over our auditorium space last night to have Naomi Watts. It's a 2-hour process to set up those chairs.
Right.
So if we need to do something that's on a smaller level or switch because we have, you know, time for 2s this morning, somebody's got to be in here in order to take down those chairs and reposition. We have 9 rooms that can be utilized by both staff, the rentals, that's another piece here. This is a new demand on our service that never existed in the old building. We have 1 facilities manager. He is operating on his last nerve. There's 4 men. And we've got some opportunity now with retirement of 2 of our longstanding 50-year employees, cleaning staff, who we're having a party for today. But with the retirement of Willie and James, finally, God bless them.
Shame.
We've been able to you know, take a little bit from their funding, if you will, from their budget line and apply that toward the custodial fee. But, you know, you can imagine the bathrooms alone, like it's just a hygienic matter. We need somebody here, not just a cleaning service once a day and then an evening sweep. We need somebody here.
Yeah, and we were asked, do we also need a cleaning service in addition to a full-time custodian? The answer is absolutely
Absolutely,
yes.
yes.
Somebody coming in when the library is not open to clean everything deeply, and then we need somebody all day.
Yeah, I mean, I think focus,
to be here.
like sort of a laser focus on where everything is flat in your budget, except for these asks.
Yeah.
Right? And not that you wouldn't maybe cut elsewhere if there was a cut in
Yeah,
what we budget to you, but this is where we're asking for the increases and this is why.
yeah.
And I think that focus would be appreciated. When, you know, if we get answers to the 14 questions and we can sort of resolve that between Eric and me, I think it's, you know, because we, as town council, you know, we can only cut. And some people take that as a responsibility.
Yeah.
And so to the extent it's talked about that in the simplest terms, that, you know, we need to have clean facilities, clean bathrooms, somebody dedicated to do that, come in overnight to clean so that when you come in the morning, it's spick and span. So I think that's helpful, right, Eric? If we can get those questions answered well in advance that sort of percolate a lot, and just get that, then we can really focus on where the increased ask is coming from too.
And why they
so-
make sense.
We'll get you that information. After that happens, I thought, Eric, you said maybe there was going to be another sort of conversation. And we're so happy to turn up and answer any of those questions, but what does that format look like? I wouldn't want it to take up any of the budget time.
No,
So how do we make that work?
I think Hillary and I've gotta put our
gotta
heads
look-
together and figure out what that looks like, because
Okay, great.
the next town council meeting is February 26th. Obviously, I would love to, Hillary, you and I make a report on this conversation and have the questions answered and make a summary report to the rest of town council at that meeting.
Yeah.
But from that point forward, Ellen, it's really budget. So I got to figure out how, or we have to figure out how we have this follow-up conversation and how we share it with town council and how we then follow up with you. I don't know
Happy to
exactly
do-
what that looks like.
I think that's what's required. I'm happy to meet with you in a public meeting format, if that makes sense. Are you allowed to, we could just set a meeting? Is that?
we can
Well,
have
if
a-
we set a meeting, it has to be publicly noticed, and we have to have an agenda, and we have to offer a Zoom capability or whatever, but we can figure out how to do that.
Could you add them to your February agenda?
I'm sorry, what?
Could you add them to your February 26th agenda?
At this point, I don't see why not. I just want to talk to Mike and I want to talk to Hillary offline and say, can we do that? And if so, how much time would we need? And yeah, that's a possibility, sure.
March 20th. I mean, it might be helpful to do a subcommittee kind of a meeting as opposed to that.
When do you present to
March
us?
20th.
No,
To you,
February.
you're February 6th. Yes.
They'll be done with us. Presentation, so they won't have a budget issue, on the 26th.
Right. Well, like I said, right now, I don't see why not, but I'm the junior member here and we got to figure out what's going to work and how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's validity to what you're suggesting, because if we notice a meeting of our subcommittee, for instance, which is a handful of people, there will probably be people who aren't on our subcommittee who join it. So does it make more sense just to?
Turn up on the 26th.
Yeah, and Eric and I can talk about that
Okay.
and figure out, and we'll be in touch with you really
Okay.
soon.
For this meeting, you said.
Well, that's very good to know, because Eric, I was about to buy my own plane ticket to Naples, Florida for February 26th, so I'll have to postpone it for the next morning.
Oh, we'll figure that out then. Let's figure that out. We'll figure that out sooner rather than later so that we're not impacting anybody's travel plans, but for sure.
I will still
I
be
will
in
make
Naples on
myself available.
February 26th, but yeah.
Okay. I will be here.
You're-
Any snow down there?
Did you say you're still gonna be there February 26th? Is that what you said?
We leave our rental in Naples on the 26th and we go to Delray Beach. So the night of February 26th, I will be Zooming the town council meeting from the Courtyard Hotel in Delray Beach. So I'll be living on Zoom until the end of February.
Well, maybe I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
There you
I
go.
suspect it's gonna be better weather than here, so. Don't feel bad. All right,
I have to say, I really appreciate, this has been remarkably helpful for us as well. And I love the efficiency and the opportunity to just to be, open, transparent, and having you both teams here, if you will, it's extremely useful for us. So thank you for making this happen.
Thank you.
thank you. Good.
Great.
Okay, bye, Eric.
All right. Bye.
Talk soon.
Thanks, Hillary. We'll be in touch.
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay.